but that did fade with time. And it was interesting. As you had sent me these questions, it was interesting to watch the political parties try to lever that fear. I remember the Democrats put a TV commercial on that showed, I believe it was Barry Goldwater being some kind of crazed guy pressing the button that started the nuclear war that blew up the world. I mean, I think that's on Google or on, I think it's on YouTube. But you just see this giant mushroom cloud. It's kind of like, uh-oh, he did it. It was that kind of stuff. And in time, that kind of stuff no longer had effect. It was freak people out in the beginning and changed the way they voted. But people just got used to it, as you said, and we didn't live in fear of the Russians doing anything. I think we began to realize the Russians were kind of weak as we've seen them now. They do have nuclear weapons, but we've watched them in Ukraine be slowed down. And, you would have thought that, Russia has always portrayed itself as a strong empire that's kind of equal with the United States. And the reality is that it is not equal in military strength. No, McCarthyism happened before my memories. I read all about it. I know about it, but it happened. And you got to realize it all happened within 8 or 10 years of World War II, when the Soviet Union did take over all of Eastern Europe. I mean, it was weird. There was like no contact with Poland. Occasionally you would see something imported and it was smuggled in. Like I was an IHOP cook when I was 18 in College Station, and we got hams. That would be 1974. I was I was working at IHOP, and the stuff comes in from Eastern Europe. I don't know who they paid to get it in, but none of that was ever coming in from the Soviet Union. You'd also see it was canned hams that came from Poland, and we would put them in the omelets. And then I remember going through Woolworths, and which Woolworths was a kind of a nickel and dime store. We called them back then. It was inexpensive things, and they had a lunch counter that's very famous. You can Google Woolworths lunch counters, and people my age ate French fries there, hamburgers, which is kind of, well, there wasn't a bunch of McDonald's or things, but that was a place where you could go get a meal. And I remember walking through Woolworths and seeing these beautiful Christmas ornaments, and they were made in Czechoslovakia. And I was so fascinated, I bought them because I'd never seen anything from Eastern Europe. And I was about a 13 or 14-year-old kid. I took my money from mowing lawns and bought Christmas ornaments that were from Czechoslovakia. I'd never seen. So interesting to have something from this place that this iron curtain was there that you could not see behind it. Cuba was just kind of out there. Castro, the no talk around town. It was just kind of a satellite of the Soviet Union is how. Well, no, that's interesting because when people would travel, they would buy these illegal Cuban cigars and smuggle them back in their suitcases. It was like a, big deal to have a Cuban cigar, which I smoked one once and it was horrible. It was about had a taste like a horse stable. So I don't know what the big deal was about a Cuban cigar, but it's always, something's always sweet if you can't have it, right? Well, Soviet Union kind of faded in our minds. The 70s came. That was about the time that things thawed. I remember Bush Sr. was like the ambassador to China, and things thawed with China. China was another weird place. We'd get a few glimpses and pictures of these millions of people in all these suits that looked identical, riding on black bicycles. That was our picture of China. No, for real, you can go look at this stuff. Go Google it. That is what my generation saw. So the 70s and 80s, by the 80s, of course, by the end of the 80s, the Soviet Empire collapsed. So I think they were on the Soviet Union got in trouble in the 1980s, if I'm remembering right. They got into Afghanistan, went in there, got bogged down in a war, which basically was their Vietnam. It destroyed them. The Taliban and all those guys that were there just slowly ground the Soviets down. And the Soviet Union just came to a stop. I think they just went broke with that war. And it was reported to us in the West that the soldiers there was no money anymore to pay them. And they just ended up walking back to the Soviet Union. as it fell apart. It fell apart in '89. That's when the Berlin Wall came down, and Ronald Reagan was a great hero. He was a great hero in America that made Americans who had lost confidence in ourselves and in themselves have confidence again. Jimmy Carter was kind of an era that we're in right now under President Biden, where you feel like there's a real unsteady hand holding the ship together. And inflation was kind of like it is now, where, they say it's 7%. You go to buy things. I went and bought things this last week, and they were double what they used to be. It was a washer and a dryer. It used to be $1,000 a piece. I went and priced them yesterday. They were $2,000 a piece. So the inflation figures are a lie. They're usually much higher than the government tells the body politic. Oh, it was a relief. It was kind of like, thank God we don't have to worry about someone pressing a button and blowing everybody up. I mean, you still always thought about that in the back of your mind being a possibility. And it just all collapsed. The year prior to that, Ronald Reagan had gone to East Berlin and said, Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And because before that, when anyone would try to leave the Soviet Union, the Russians would just shoot them in the back and kill them. No one was allowed out. No one was allowed in. It was just like basically it was a jail cell that was this huge, huge country. Well, I hope so. And I hope that the last thing I want to tell them is the United States is a great country, and we survived the Cold War because we have freedom here. People desire freedom. Freedom is the engine for ingenuity. It's what makes things happen. And in the Soviet Union, there was no freedom. Things ground to a halt. As we reduce freedom here to do business and personal freedom, the country will decline. If we can preserve freedom, we will continue to be the strongest and most wonderful free country in the world. And I just wanted to part by saying that. And I hope that's where we go. Oh, that flag, my father, which would be Alex McMullen, Dr. McMullen's, that was his granddad, he was at the end of World War II. He was a master sergeant in the Marine Corps. And when he died in 1989, he died in 2009. 2009, the U.S. Marines came to his graveside and played taps and laid that flag there over his casket. Then they folded it up, gave it to my mother, who now is deceased, and I ended up with that flag. You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity and the privilege to speak to you guys. I appreciate it.